Hello, everyone. We're here to talk about Akilla's Escape, the new film by Charles Officer. We're joined by director Charles Officer, as well as the star of the film, Saul Williams, and co-star Thamela Mpumlwana. Welcome to this Q&A. Thank you so much for bringing the film to the Toronto Film Festival.
Thank you so much, Cameron. It's an honor to be presenting this film at Toronto International Film Festival. It's my home city, and it is a story that I dedicate to the city. So thank you for programming the film.
I want to hear a little bit more about that. Charles, you've made fiction and documentary films, you made features and short films. There's often an exploration of how history shapes the current lives of your characters, your Black characters. And that's certainly here in Akilla's Escape as well. But you talked also about it being connected to Toronto. Can you tell me a little bit about that connective tissue between the city and the story?
Yes, it's, growing up here in the city in Toronto, the work that I do in film is one thing, but within the community, spent a lot of time working with young boys and Black boys specifically in communities. And it's been my sort of mission or somehow a story that I keep coming back to from my early short films, from short hymn Silent War that also played at Tiff many years ago, where I was speaking on the aftermath of gun violence and that cycle. And it was always a question for me, and something that stirs inside my body and keeps me up at night is this cycle of violence, generational violence, and looking at the core of it. But within this city, there are young boys that lose their lives, that are connected to a larger organization, and they're the pawns in this. And it's really a reaction to being tired of seeing Black boys specifically, and the disregard for those lives. So that's stemming from Toronto and having Jamaican roots. There's a whole political history in Jamaica where, political corruption and the lack of governance has led to, empowered, gang culture. And wherever there's poverty and dreams, this is the struggle. So, this thing that I'm talking about doesn't have borders, but because I'm here in the city, I want to speak to this city and the issues that actually happen here and make that connection internationally.
Now, when you talk about Black men and you talk about gang culture, there's a lot of stereotypes that are at play when it comes to movies and TV shows that have shaped a lot of misconceptions out there. And I wanted to ask you first, Charles, about how you approach that, wanting to step away from those stereotypes. And then for both of the actors, for Saul and for Thamela, what was important to you in terms of portraying these characters so that you weren't kind of, even accidentally falling into those kind of tropes?
Yeah, it's, there's this cultural acceptance of violence that, I think is part of this colonial system, designed to socialize and control and specifically affects, Black people, Black boys. In the idea of this, essentially, I'm trying to articulate what was sitting with me was articulating a story about a boy who wanted to escape this. He was born into something. And that nurturing and the sort of what he gets from his mother, which is Akilla Brown. And as a man, he carries that with him. He's a nonviolent. What happens to the boy who's naturally nonviolent, but is groomed in this world, and trying to portray that in a way that there is someone who knows how, and can choose to use it, but he has other ways of approaching things. So I think of the Greek mythology of Akilla, which is part of this film. This is my Black Achilles. He's a war hero. We don't often associate this mythology with great warriors of the urban core that are Black men, and that battle and that Trojan horse and that strategy and the political sort of spaces that are sucking you into this cycle. So these are all the layers that I was trying to articulate, and knowing Saul Williams and his soul and his majestic aura, I just felt that he was the perfect person to portray this man.
Mm-hmm. Saul, can you talk a little bit about the character of Akilla, and especially with, there's a lot here, many different layers that Charles is talking about. What was your approach to actually shaping this character?
Well, I think the key to shaping the character was, in total honor to Charles, it was in the writing. It was very clearly in the writing that this was very much about breaking generational trauma. Even with the emphasis on, wanting to address the issues of violence and how it affects Black men, what really draws Akilla into his highest self, which is, I think, a place where he's really aiming to operate from, is because he sees how it impacts the women in the community. He sees how it impacts his mother, and his response in life is a direct reflection of his realization that I cannot carry this on. I cannot become my father. I cannot, take this violence a step further. And then what he has to learn is that, perhaps it's not as easy to step away from as one might imagine, and that he cannot passively step away from it. He has to make an active decision to do that. And I think he attempts to do that through his engagement with Sheppard. So for me, in shaping that character, it was so influenced really by the writing that it left me at a place of just a sort of innate understanding, one, of what Charles was trying to do there, and also of where Akilla was in his life, and how he was nonviolent, and how he would have to be pushed to a very far extreme to bring out that violence in him.
Thamela, you've done loads of series. You're young, but you've been acting for a long time, including Star Trek Discovery, Murdoch Mysteries, Frankie Drake. What was different for you about acting in this film, in Akilla's Escape?
Well, I'd say that, for this film in particular, one, I had to carry two versions of my role, which was being young Akilla and then being the kind of like embodiment of who older Akilla saw himself as in that, during that time period. So I guess the differences was just kind of like trying to grasp the character's mindset from as many perspectives as possible, given the fact that not these characters aren't completely separate. They have a connection, and finding where that connection is within, their own relative backstories, as well as, their, respective, storylines. So I guess with this character, it was a lot of just trying to see who he was from the eyes of his, the eyes of his father, the eyes of his mother, as young Akilla, understanding what this kind of person would be looking for and reaching out to in that age group, in that position, in that kind of orientation of life. And then, for, Sheppard, who is in kind of a different time period, understanding, the difficulties that come with his position, that come with his circumstances, but in a modern day setting. So it's really just trying to just understand how these characters are adapting, how they're growing, what is the resistance in the things that they want to pursue, and then what do they feel compelled to do. Mm-hmm. So it's just finding intention and finding, finding motive.
Okay, thank you. Saul, I understand you also collaborated with 3D from Massive Attack on the soundtrack for the film. Can you, and maybe Charles as well, you talk about how the music is in dialogue with the story that you're telling?
Well, if I may, I mean, the first thing that happened was when Charles shared the script with me, I was already engaged with Robert Del Naja. We were working on music, but with no end goal in sight, just, as two friends saying, let's try this, throwing ideas back and forth. And I read the script, and I think I approached Charles immediately with it and said, well, he mentioned that he was interested in my music. And I told him, I've actually been working on something that feels very connected. It feels very connected also because, of course, Massive Attack has this kind of dub, related sound and what have you. So sonically, I was already like, oh, this feels connected. And the first song that came to mind was actually the first song that I think Charles fell in love with, which is a song called "We Get What You Deserve," and from there, I just had this sense, and so I shared it with Charles, and then from there, we were able to make sense of it with the grace of Robert and what have you, and so it was a sort of intuitive connection that occurred, and from there we were able to take it a few steps further.
Nice. Charles, it sounds like this wasn't planned, but it was just a beautiful accident.
It was a beautiful accident, but also just going back to what Saul mentioned, it was, this film, I wanted to be a Saul Williams project. So I really wanted his touch in the music from the get-go. Had other ideas. I mean, I love, his catalog of music. So he was going to be involved in that way, but it was, a gift. And just by the nature of I guess the gods bringing us together, that this music, and when I heard it, and Massive Attack has had a massive influence on my life, creating, when I was a designer, just this music and the flavor of it, the tone of it. So we were really blessed, and Robert was so generous with us as well. The patience, considering, gotta shut him out, because this is an incredible, amazing artist that I couldn't believe that I was, already working with Saul, Bella, and this amazing Denisha, and then Robert's in the mix, and exchanging emails with someone who's actually doesn't really. I just have to say one thing: when I sent him the first rough cut, it was so early. And I never share work this early. And I wrote him this note. I wrote a note to Saul and Robert, and basically said, "Hey, this is rough cut. I can't tell you how nervous I am right now sharing this with you." Robert responds. He says, "No stress. I understand exactly where you are." And it was just like, okay.
And he loved it. And he loved it.
And he responded so positively right away. And I was like, oh my gosh, we have still mountains to go. But just to have that sort of like, oh yeah, these artists are like, at the core of it, when sometimes you get down to the work, it's just, you forget that someone of that stature and those folks are like, they go through their process too. So it was really, really powerful.
Nice. So it's been a long time, so I don't know if you remember, but you were at our festival in 1998 with a film called Slam that was in Planet Africa. And, you do so much more than act in movies, but you have been acting for quite a while in film. I wonder if, going back to Slam and thinking now of Akilla's Escape, if you've seen any evolution in African diasporic voices in film. Has there been some change, some growth?
Oh, certainly. I mean, I immediately thought of everyone from Mati Diop to Alan Gomes to Barry Jenkins to there's so many different voices and more than voices, different approaches to narrative, because that's the thing that we're hungry for when we talk about having a new gaze on cinema. It's not simply having, seeing ourselves reflected in front of and behind the camera. It's not simply our stories, but our way of telling stories.
Tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that. When what is different? What are the different ways of telling stories?
Well, there's a lot of possibility there. You know, there's the possibility of a circular narrative, right? So, you know, in the template of what is expected, let's say, of a Hollywood film, the role of the protagonist, the role of the antagonist, what page that antagonist is supposed to appear on, you know, all of these things that you're supposed to learn. It would have you think that there's only one way of conveying information, only one way of being entertained, you know? And a lot of my work has been about exploring the other ways in which we can engage with entertainment, and entertainment can engage us, you know? And so cinema plays a huge role in that, because its impact is so strong on how we think and how we, you know, contain images and process images of the so-called other. And as we know, that dates back to the role of Birth of a Nation, on Black American culture, on trans culture, on, you know, like, there's so many ways in which cinema has impacted our lives and the gaze on our lives. And so I think the role that someone like Charles can play, and so many of the, and when I say new voices, I don't only mean new voices, because I think of Hadi Garima, I think of Getty Falan, I think of, you know, all of the people that are saying, who have been sometimes overlooked, you know, people like Julie Dash, people that who may not have gotten the greatest respect from the industry, but because they've been expected to fall into line. And here is cinema that also says, hey, sometimes that line is a circle. Sometimes that line spirals in other ways, you know? And so I'm extremely interested in that. And yes, I do think that we are, you know, making progress, not only in cinema, but you see it in series. You look at shows like Random Acts of Flyness or something, and you go, wow, this narrative is moving in a way that's different from what I'm used to. And that's also what we're looking for. When I approach making music with poetry and all this stuff, was always trying to find a way to go beyond what I'm used to.
Yeah, it's not just the what or the who, it's the how as well. How is it being told? Charles, I want to end by asking you about this as well. And, you know, how do you see your work within the history of what we're talking about here in terms of just Black diasporic screen storytelling, but also just, you know, beyond Canada, because you've also got connections to the UK, to the US, to Jamaica. Do you see yourself in some way as a kind of one of these diasporic voices we're talking about, or how do you frame that?
I do. I feel like, you know, I feel like we as Black filmmakers, as creators, we're building an archive no matter where we live. And I think that, you know, it's important that, you know, I have to speak honestly, Planet Africa was a massive influence on me in the early stages of me exploring this big, bad, intimidating film festival. And I had my first short film that ever made play there. So I was introduced into this world that I had this sort of place where do I belong? But, you know, Planet Africa brought me into this diaspora of people who I didn't really know about, but was blown away by. I got a massive education to that, and then realized that, you know, maybe there is a place that I can be positioned here in Canada and add to this global archive. So I think, you know, our stories are valid, and it's still a mission for sure that everywhere we're fighting for the respect and the value of our stories and our experiences, and the way that, and I love what Saul's talking about, is the way that you know, stories are told and how we exchange, and the oral traditions of griots and like how we share stories culturally. And, you know, the cinema and the industry wasn't particularly designed with an invitation for us to really join in and share in that evolution. So we've got to come into it and understand it, but I don't think it's something that we'd have to dismiss, you know, deconstructing. I think we can deconstruct it and reframe things. And that's the beauty of cinema and that medium. from the greatest filmmakers, they really push the medium.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all. It's been a great conversation. So glad to have Akilla's Escape as a part of the festival and within the frame of Planet Africa as well. It's very resonant. This is exactly the kind of film that if we were still doing Planet Africa, it would be one of the first things we would want to jump on. So thank you so much, Thamela and Saul and Charles. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you.